So I'm going to enjoy the first hour.
Yes. Well, you'll have the recording.
Yeah.
You get the rest after.
So I'm going to enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I invited a few friends. I'm not sure if they will turn up or not on a Sunday morning. It's morning time here, 11 o'clock.
All right.
We are 2 hours behind Trinidad time.
Alrighty, everyone. It is 1 o'clock, and I believe we are all here for everyone that's reading so far. So I'm going to start in just 1 minute. So I'm basically going to start with an introduction, and then Jenny Lynn is going to do a presentation, and then she's going to read, and from there we have Cynthia, Mutilal, myself, Heather, and Althea. And of course, after the readings, we can have questions and stuff like that as well. And I believe there are questions. Oh, Krishna's coming in. If there's a question and answer section in the presentation, Jenny Lynn.
Yes.
So,
Gersha,
yeah.
do you have control in the imaging on the transmission, like where you can see all the participants?
I do. You want me to change it to that?
Yeah.
Gallery mode. There we go. Everybody happy with that? I'm going to have to spotlight Jenny Lynn when she's giving her presentation though, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start then. Just allow me to give my go-tos. Heather and Muti. Hi, Muti. Making you guys co-hosts as well, just in case. And if anybody else, I don't know, Krishna may be watching sports and on as well, so we'll see. You want to, I can make you co-host?
No, it's okay. Match is finished.
All righty.
I just euphoric over the result.
Okay, who won?
Well, I wasn't watching West Indies Australian. Okay.
All right, maybe he didn't hear me. I'm late. Oh, someone's coming in. Helen? Helen? We've had Helen before. Krishna, you're muted if you're speaking.
No, I finished speak.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the record. Okay. All right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Poetry and Prose. It is the 6th of July, and this is our Author of the Month meeting. Thank you so much for being with us and for doing this. We look forward to hearing more about you. I'm going to take this time to introduce our lovely author of the month, Jenny Lynn James. She's a Renaissance woman, a food scientist, which I find so interesting, soprano, writer, and fine artist in one package. Jenny Lynn was raised in Trinidad and Tobago and obtained a PhD in food science and molecular genetics at McGill University in Canada. She worked for many years in the food industry in the United States, Latin America, Europe, and Canada. Jenny Lynn was introduced to painting, portraiture, and sketching in 2009 in Ireland, while she actually ran a food business. She uses the vivid colors of her Caribbean heritage and global travel to influence her artwork. From childhood, Jenny Lynn played the piano and has sung in large choirs in each country where she has lived, like the Marinettes, Chorale in Trinidad and Tobago, the Ventura Master Chorale in Ventura, California, the Guinness Choir in Dublin, Ireland, and the Toronto, I may mispronounce this, Mendelssohn Choir in Canada. She now sings as a soprano with the Madrid City Choir in Yucatan, Mexico. Over the years, Jenny Lynn has written and published peer-reviewed research papers for food science journals. She also edited and published the science textbook, Microbial Hazard Identification in the Fruit and Vegetable Industry, published by John Wiley and Sons, New York in 2006. This textbook was included in the food technology curriculum at universities in the United States over the years. She was commissioned by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations to write the guidance document, Processing of Fresh-Cut Tropical Fruits and Vegetables, a technical guide. Jenny Lynn has published a series of travel memoirs which recount her adventures in relocating from one country to the next. Join me in welcoming Dr. Jenny Lynn James, our author of the month.
Thank you so much, Gersha, for the introduction. And thanks so much Poetry and Prose for hosting me and making me or appointing me the author of the month. It is quite an honor. Thanks to Mrs. Birch, my past English teacher, for introducing me to the group. So what I'm going to do, I have a PowerPoint slide presentation, and I'm going to just go through the presentation and tell you a little bit about myself. After that presentation, we have time for questions, comments, anything you'd like to add, and then we'll start the book readings. So as Gersha told you in the introduction, I have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I use all my talents. So I'm a soprano. I learned to sing in Trinidad, right? Music festivals, etc. An artist, writer, entrepreneur, and I'll tell you how, this entrepreneur got started. And I'm a food scientist. I've been a food scientist for my whole working career. Born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago, I always include this because sometimes I do presentations and people have never heard of Trinidad and Tobago, so I have to show on the map, southernmost country in the Caribbean archipelago, right next to Venezuela. I did a bachelor's degree in biochemistry at McGill. It was pre-med. Decided I didn't want to do medicine. I moved back to Trinidad and did a master's in food technology and started working at companies like Matooks in Trinidad. Then I got a Commonwealth scholarship and went back to McGill to do a PhD in food science and molecular genetics. After that, being the perpetual student, I couldn't stop. So I did a postdoctoral research fellowship at Florida A&M University in agriculture. And this was my introduction to working in agriculture after this research project. I did a number of peer-reviewed scientific papers, various journals, based on my research at McGill and also the research that was done. And I would say, I started writing by doing technical reports, book chapters, that sort of thing. After the postdoctoral research fellowship, I moved to California to take up a job in industry at a company called Boscovich Farms. They were about 50 miles north of Los Angeles, and this company grew different vegetables and strawberries. I was responsible for managing quality assurance and food safety programs. And the company had business in Southern California, Central California. So a bit of traveling to visit the farms, or did the farms make recommendations for improvements when it came to implementing food safety programs. After working with Boscovich for 3 years, I moved to Dole Food Company. Their headquarters were in Westlake, California. And there I worked closely with Dole Fresh Fruits Division, managing quality assurance and food safety programs for the bananas and pineapples coming into United States at the time. So I had quite a bit of travel to visit the banana and pineapple growing regions, Honduras, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Peru. Quite a bit of travel with this job. Here's a picture of me in at a pineapple plantation in Costa Rica. Now, after working in the fresh produce industry in North America and Latin America for a while, I wanted to get European work experience and managed to land a job in Ireland, at a company called Healings Multiples. So I was a technical manager there, and I had certain commodities that I would be responsible for. Temperate fruits that were being imported into Ireland for sale at retail outlets throughout the country. And again, with this job, it involved traveling to visit farms and pack houses to review their quality assurance and food safety programs. During this time, I found, spare time, if you could call it that, to finish a publication that I had started while living in California. And it was a textbook, one of the biggest tasks I ever had when I came to writing and technical writing, microbial hazard identification in fresh fruits and vegetables. So I wrote the introductory chapter, and I got some contributing authors, scientists who worked in the field for many years, people who taught at various universities, primarily in the US. And I had to edit their work. So it was a mammoth task, published in 2006, and I'm quite proud of this publication. I still get royalties to this day, even though it's trickled down a bit, but it was quite exciting to see the first check from a publication. Shortly after that, I was commissioned by Food and Agriculture Organization to write a guidance document, processing of fresh cut tropical fruits and vegetables, a technical guide. Most of the guidance documents in the past were all about temperate fruits, and there was nothing related to tropical fruits and vegetables at that time. I'm sure there's more now, but at the time when we started the project, there was no guidance document for tropical fruits and vegetables. And the editor, Rosa Roll, she was from Dominica, so fellow Caribbean scientists who got me involved in this project. Well, I went off on an adventure, my first entrepreneurial gig, because I thought I could only work for companies. But I had some friends in Dublin, Ireland, who convinced me that I could start a business. I didn't know I could start and run a business. So I started importing Caribbean food products and reselling at specialty events and also specialty food shops in Dublin, Ireland. So this was 2006. And I joined Women's Business Network run by the Dublin City Enterprise Board, got lots of ideas on how to run a business, how to, check the ledgers, do your accounting and all that, because I had no idea how to run a business, but lots of support was provided. And Dennis O'Brien, he was one of the entrepreneurs invited to speak to us. He's the founder of Digicel. We have Digicel throughout the Caribbean, Haiti, Jamaica, Trinidad. Many countries use the Digicel network for cell phones. So I actually met the founder, and he spoke about starting many businesses, and all his businesses failed until the telecommunications business picked up and made him a multimillionaire. It was fascinating to listen to him, and I thought, well, if you fail, you just pick yourself up and try again. And that was the motto. So with this Caribbean Enterprises, I was importing Walkerswood brand of product from Jamaica. Some of you may know that brand. And there was a time when the company shut down and I had no product to sell. And I had to pivot and find something else to do. You know, I was getting highlighted in newspapers in Dublin, etc., magazines, asked to participate in events. But when the imports failed, I decided, since I had a background in food technology from the University of the West Indies, I knew how to make sauces and condiments and preserved products. So I started making my own products and developed the brand Taste of the Caribbean. I got someone to work on branding. This is a cartoon version of Jenny Lind in a Caribbean costume, you know. So I had to pivot and make my own products. And it was a great experiment, you know, learn how to do packaging and labels. And so I started Taste of the Caribbean, making my own range of Caribbean sauces and spice blends, rebranded using red, green, and gold. And then I even got a van for deliveries. Imagine I became a delivery driver, dropping off my product at various shops around not only the Republic of Ireland, I even reached some stores in Northern Ireland. So it was quite an exciting time, a lot of work, but very exciting. And I got an award as an emerging entrepreneur. Quite an achievement for someone who always thought, you know, you had to, well, my parents in Trinidad would say, work for 33 and 1/3 years, collect your pension. One of the highlights was presenting my range of sources to millionaire investors in a program called the Irish Dragon's Den. It's similar to what they call Shark Tank in the United States. And so we have a picture of me with the dragon. Are you hearing me?
Yes, you went out for a moment, but you're
You
back.
accidentally muted
I wonder
yourself.
why.
Accidentally
All right.
muted yourself.
Yes, so this was one of the highlights in 2010. And there was a blip in performance of the business. However, the country was in full recession. In fact, there was a worldwide recession at that time. And everything fizzled out. I lost the business. I lost my car, my van, my house, everything. Because the recession was quite debilitating for the country on the whole. And so I had to figure out what to do next, where to go next. Well, since I was a Canadian citizen, I decided to relocate to Canada. But instead of going back to Montreal, where I'd lived for 7 years, I decided to go to Toronto, the English-speaking capital. And of course, going there, I had to search for employment, maybe using my knowledge as a food scientist, search for work at a food company. It wasn't easy to find work, so my entrepreneurial skills had to be used. Create a consulting firm where I could help food companies. I had started painting in Ireland, so I decided to start an art business, paint and try to sell my art if I could. And you see this painting that I've highlighted here? The High Commissioner Trinidad and Tobago in Toronto, she actually purchased this painting and it's somewhere in their office. So it was very exciting because they hosted my first art exhibition at the Trinidad and Tobago High Commission in Toronto, and the High Commission purchased this painting. Anyway, I couldn't get Ireland out of my head, so my first memoir, Escape from Éire. Éire is the Irish or Gaelic for Ireland. I wrote this book, self-published in 2013, and rebranded Escape from Ireland. Many people didn't know what Éire meant, so I rebranded and listed the book as Escape from Ireland. And I wrote this book because I had so many profound experiences in Ireland. I thought, you know, I had to put it in writing before I forgot all the amazing things that I learned. So carving out a niche in Toronto, I try to use all my skills, you know, taking part in outdoor art shows, writing new memoirs, and trying to sell at bookshops and book fairs, etc. Here I am with members of the Toronto Mendelssohn Choir. For one point in time, I actually made hats and jewelry. I tried all different outlets as an entrepreneur, literally for survival. So here you can see the memoirs that I published. The first one, Escape from Ireland, a memoir of love and adventure in Ireland. If you get a chance, you should read this one because there's a love story in it, and it's very exciting, as well as all the entrepreneurial gigs. The second publication, which we will be reading from today, Goodbye Frying Pan, Hello Fire. This one talks about the first 2 years trying to survive in Toronto, Canada. Now, before moving to Ireland, we lived in California for 6 years. And I wrote this book to go through all the adventures of living in Southern California, traveling for work to Latin America. So red car, long legs. I actually owned a red car at the time, which is very Southern Californian. So this book talks about all the adventures of living and working in Southern California. Another book that I felt I had to write, Dérivé in French, or Drivé in Trinidadian parlance. Drivé talks about returning to Trinidad and feeling like a tourist because I left in 1992. Everything changes rapidly. And so I talk about going back to Trinidad and just feeling like a stranger. All the friends have moved on, and those who are there, you know, you're a bit of a stranger to them too. So Drivé is a collection of stories going back and forth to Trinidad. This book is near and dear to my heart. My mother died of Alzheimer's disease in 2018. So going back to Trinidad to arrange her funeral was bittersweet, really. And so I wrote this book as a form of healing. And it talks about 12 years, a slow demise. For 12 years, we saw the signs, we saw the decline, and it was slow. It's a slow, debilitating disease. And so where are my car keys? You know, my mother loved her car. When she didn't remember who I was, she remembered her car. And she always looked for her car keys. That's where the name came from. And I wrote an illustrated children's book. Is That My Granny? We talk about, you know, my nephews, my daughter seeing Granny's slow decline, and I illustrated. It was my first children's book, and I had it published in several languages too, because I found no references for children to learn about Alzheimer's disease. I couldn't find anything, so I said, you know what, I will write the book. Very simple kids' book, but easy for children to understand the decline Alzheimer's. And this one is a novel, my first fiction, and it's called Mrs. Somebody, What She Did for That Ring. So a series of dating stories, modern dating, you know, using the internet and apps, etc. Some of these stories are my own, and most of them are stories that friends have told me over the years. So I use fictitious characters and weave all the stories together, and the protagonist has fun dating around town, etc. So these are my publications, and this is the first attempt at writing fiction. Now in 2020, with the worldwide pandemic, everything shut down in Toronto, and there was nowhere to go. It was quite a depressing situation. And spring 2021, I decided to leave. Work had dried up. We couldn't do any art fairs. So it was best to leave for mental health, I tell people. But I couldn't figure out where to go next because, most of the world had shut down. It was the middle of the pandemic. But looking online, one YouTuber described that Mexico was open, and it truly was. When I learned about this, I sold everything that I could, and what I couldn't sell, I just gave it away and left on a new adventure to Yucatan. Now, I tell people Yucatan, some people don't really know where it is. So Yucatan is a tropical side of Mexico. It's next to Quintana Roo. A lot of people know that state, Quintana Roo, because Cancun is in Quintana Roo. Yucatan is the state next to it. Tropical weather. So I'm here for now, unless something changes. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions
Yes.
or queries for
Jenny,
me?
that's a really very interesting journey you have gone through and are continuing to do so.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed with your accomplishments in food science. And if I might ask a very silly question. So now when you pick up a fruit from the grocery and you pick it up, do you enjoy that fruit like the rest of us, or do you go through the whole gamut of quality control and so on before you take your first bite?
When it comes to fruits and vegetables, usually I enjoy them. When I go to a restaurant, however, because I have audited a lot of food processing plants, so I've seen in the factories what people could do and the damage that could be done. And I've also been behind the scenes, in the mall where people are preparing food, and I've seen some awful practices. I do get a bit concerned with prepared meals and packaged foods because I've audited more than 100 food processing plants in Canada, United States, Latin America. So for processed foods, I am concerned, and also, like in restaurants.
Yeah,
I must admit.
I can understand that. As a undergraduate student back in the 60s in Saskatchewan, I worked as a room service waiter in a fairly upscale hotel where the queen would stay when she would come. And even at that level of food handling, the awful things I saw behind the scenes, I agree with you. And the one more thing, my wife, I have to leave at 2:00 to go to the nursing home. My wife is also struggling with Alzheimer's. I'd be interested in reading your book on that. She's been struggling with that now for 12 years.
Oh my goodness, yes.
But she's still quite active, but you can see this very, very slow decline.
Slow decline, yes. It's difficult to watch, really.
Yeah, and that book you wrote about it, different dating activities. I tell people at age 78, I should go to a dating site called Carbon Dating.
Carbon Dating. It's an interesting name. Oh boy. Okay, thanks. Does anyone else have any comment or question for me?
Your background was so scientific. How did you get to the writing path, especially creative writing?
Creative writing. Well, I've always been interested in creative writing. Even when we did English literature in school for O-levels, and or just English language, I think we had to write essays and write stories, and it was really my favorite part of English way back in O-levels at that time. And I love to tell stories. I always have a lot to say. So it was a natural transition to write stories because I enjoy watching plays. I don't like movies because they're rehearsed, but live theater, I really enjoy that. And I like storytelling. So I think it was quite an easy transition, even though I have a technical science background. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just want to say, Janelyn,
Yes.
I just want to say, it's just a comment. Um, from what you just described and what you just narrated, I admire your resilience, resourcefulness, courage, and creativity.
Thank you so
That's
much.
the comment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's hasn't been easy, but you know, I really learned a lot living in Ireland. I must say, the Irish spirit, and they kind of like Caribbean people, really. But being involved in entrepreneur groups, I've watched people whose businesses failed and then they tried something else, try something else, try something else. And the type of encouragement that people gave, say, fail, okay, do something else. It was no big deal. Nobody was laughing at you because your business failed. Nobody. They say, really? Okay, what else can you do? What skills do you have? And so I must say, I learned that lesson from living in Ireland and being involved with a lot of entrepreneurs. And it didn't matter. Well, you try one thing, it didn't work, try something else, it doesn't work, try. So I've adopted that attitude. Of course, some people will say, it's a bit mad, but that's okay. It's better
Yeah, we're
to
not mad.
get
It's scary. Scary.
yes, yes. But if you hang around with entrepreneurs who have a similar mindset, it is easier than settled people who don't want to change. So sometimes it's easier to just chat with entrepreneurs because they will understand, you know.
Yes, that line you gave about Dennis O'Brien, put it in context, where you said he tried a number of things and then he got the jackpot in telecommunications.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Dennis O'Brien.
But what you have done would terrify me, would scare me to sell everything and give up everything and relocate.
Yes, yes. Most
I
people wouldn't be able to
tend
do
to
it.
hold on. You tend to hold on to what is familiar and what
Yes.
you have, rather
And the
than
thing, yes,
rather than try something so totally different, a different environment, a different field of endeavor. Yeah, very, as I say, resilient, resourceful, creative, and courageous.
thank you. I hope to continue like that. All right.
Just
Motilal, you had
We
a
have
question?
just one more question coming up.
Okay, I just want to congratulate Janelyn on that amazing and inspiring journey, as
Thank
someone
you.
who stuck with one type of job for years. I think that your story is absolutely amazing. And I want to
Thank you.
congratulate you on that amazing journey and that inspiring journey that you took.
Thank you so much. Okay, so
Frank,
now
you wanted to ask a question?
just one more comment. I think, you know, I always tell people traveling does not mean getting on a plane, buying a ticket and going to some place and staying in a hotel. Travel is learning from every place you go. And what you have learned from living and working in all those different locations, one cannot learn from a book, I'm quite sure. So again, it's quite envious.
Okay. Yes, yes. Okay, so what we will do now, thank you, Frank. What we'll do now, we'll start with the book readings. from Goodbye Frying Pan, Hello Fire. This was published in 2014. And I wrote this book as a form of healing because I'd moved to Toronto 2011. It was one of the most difficult moves of my life. I keep saying that when I compare it to other places where I've lived, it was quite traumatic at that stage, 2014. And I just left my job. And as a form of healing, I wrote the book. I just poured everything out into it so that I could recover somewhat. And so here's the summary of the book. When the Irish economy crashes, a single mother and her daughter relocate to Toronto, Canada, with the unfamiliarity of a new land and no friends or family nearby. This drastic move was not without its challenges. Goodbye Frying Pan, Hello Fire is a tale of survival meant to inspire others dealing with the struggles of a new environment and the feelings of isolation and despair that may come along with it. Through the highs and lows, triumphs and failures, this memoir proves that determination can conquer overwhelming tribulations. So I'll read a few paragraphs from the first chapter, Arrival. Now, we were leaving Ireland, country that we love so much, and moving to Toronto, a city where we didn't know anybody. Right? So a big move. And for the first time, Ireland had a snowstorm. They had no equipment to clear snow from the runway in the airport, so everything shut down. We had to sleep in the airport. It was mayhem. Then we got a flight to Amsterdam, and we were given the word KLM, that they would get us from Amsterdam to Toronto. So that's where I'm going to start the reading. We rose early next morning and took the shuttle bus back to the airport. I wanted to be the first to stand in line at the check-in counter for the first flight out to Toronto. Standby or not, I was determined to get onto the flight. People filed in slowly. Some passengers held confirmed tickets while others were on standby like us. When they finally opened the gate, the attendant checked only the confirmed passengers. Fearing we would be left behind, I approached the counter twice to ask if there were 2 seats available. I knew I was being a pest, but I didn't care. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, as they used to say in Ireland, so I squeaked a few times to be assured a seat on the plane. Miss James, we will not know until everyone has checked onto the flight, said the blonde, prim-faced, uniformed KLM representative. She typed furiously, looking at her computer screen. Well, I just wanted to make sure, I reasoned, and walked away defeated. We were in the airport for 3 hours, and things were looking bleak. They started to board the plane, and I stood fixed in front of the attendant with my standby passes. She again typed on her computer. Finally, she said she managed to clear 2 spaces, but we would not be sitting together. I could have hugged her then, but controlled myself. Who cared if we were not sitting together? They could have strapped me to the wings. I did not want to be stranded another night. We ran into the plane and discovered we were not too far apart. I was able to get some sleep, even though it was a daytime flight. I remember eating some food in a blur, looking at the screen at some strange movie, and then drifting off again. I hoped our luggage would follow us, as we were told the night before. When we landed in Toronto, we both held Canadian passports, but they were renewed in Dublin. It was funny to get a warm greeting from the immigration officer. Welcome home, Merry Christmas. We had been living in Ireland for almost 7 years. What was this man talking about? Home? What home? In a split second, I snapped out of my stupor and realized I was actually Canadian. Remembering my manners, I responded, thanks, and Merry Christmas to you too. Anything to declare? He asked. Oh no, nothing at all. My worldly possessions were stashed in those massive suitcases, and a 40-foot container was on the way. But what did I have to declare? I didn't shop for the trip. All I had were my personal belongings. We grabbed a trolley and looked for our suitcases. After waiting for ages, one of the extra large suitcases appeared on the conveyor. Thank God, our bags are here. I did a little tribal dance. Eventually, another large suitcase emerged and we waited for the smaller bag, but it didn't come. Was that everything from Amsterdam? I asked. Yes, that's it. Good night. Merry Christmas. Almost crying, I went to the baggage claim desk and filled out a description of my bag. Luckily, I saved this stub with the barcode for the bag, but they couldn't track it. Where was home? It was December 23rd, 2010, and everybody was on the go, shopping or visiting relatives. We would be staying with an old friend, Joyce, in a place called Stony Creek, Ontario. She was a childhood friend whose family I had not seen in over 15 years. Joyce invited us to stay until I could get on my feet and find a job. It was a generous gesture. She was not able to meet us at the airport, but assured me her boyfriend would come to meet us. I was to look for a tall, heavyset white man called Luke. How many Lukes would I see at the airport, I wondered. I pondered approaching several tall white men and asking, are you Luke? We exited the baggage claim area and looked for Luke. Nobody was around. What were we to do? We were traveling for 2 days and did not know how to get to Stony Creek. Turning on my Irish cell phone, I was able to get a dial tone, so I called Joyce right away. After 2 rings, she answered. Hello, Joyce, we're finally in Toronto. That's great. I was waiting for your call. Luke is on the way, and I'll let him know that you're there. When he showed up, he recognized us right away. He had friendly blue eyes and a mop of salt and pepper hair. He was gigantic, 6'5" or taller. But his comfortable demeanor put us at ease. Hello, Joyce has told me so much about you. Really? That's great, I said, wondering what he actually knew. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? We drove for ages. This place called Stony Creek. How far is it from Toronto? I asked, looking out onto the dark highway. With no traffic, it could be 45 minutes to an hour away. Within an hour and a half, we arrived at Stony Creek. It was a suburb of a city of Hamilton, which was itself a hamlet of Toronto. Where were we indeed, and why did we decide to come all the way out there? When we got to the house, Joyce welcomed us with open arms, and I recounted our travel ordeal in great detail to get as much sympathy as possible. Joyce assured me we would have no problems, everything would be fine, and we would be comfortable for Christmas. Joyce was overly fussy. I could not remember her being so complicated in the past, but it was almost 2 decades since we shared a space as roommates in university. A great deal of time had passed. All shoes were to be removed at the front door and placed on mats. There was to be no walking on the wooden floor. That could scratch up the floor and decrease the home's resale value. A plastic strip of carpet runner was put out on major thoroughfares for heavy traffic areas. Later in the afternoon, I took a chance and tiptoed on the precious wooden floor in my socks just for a laugh when no one was looking. I stepped gingerly on the floor doing a little dance. We were asked to put our coats in a special closet near the front door. Coats, boots, scarves, and gloves were piled in with other winter gear. I noted the family's belongings were gradually emptied from that closet. Who would want to acquire the visitor's bad smell by association? I held my tongue and tried to abide by the rules of the house, since we had no other place to go. So I'm going to stop there. And throughout the chapter, I talk about how difficult it was to live at someone's house for a long period of time. It wasn't easy. And eventually we had to move out. But that was a short introduction. Does anyone have any comment, question about that first chapter? If you read the chapter, maybe you had.
I have a question. Are you guys
Yeah.
still friends? Because you moved out so quickly.
What was the question?
Are you still friends? Was that relationship
Um,
managed past that point?
You know,
after
it
you-
was a bit frigid after a while, just corresponding by text message or email. But we do keep in touch on a rare occasion, but it was quite, I would say, strained after staying a couple of weeks there. And so I would advise people, if you do move, it is best to be independent. Family and friends might say, come, stay with us, but they have their routines, and it's not a good idea to impose yourself on family and friends. The shorter the time, the better. You need to be independent. Anybody else has any question or comment?
Yeah, hi, this is Arlene.
Hello.
I'm asking from a writer's point of view in terms of writing about situations, say like with your friend. How did you feel as a writer having to talk about a situation that may not have been the most positive part, for you? Did you feel that you needed to touch base with her and talk to her about that, you were working on this, writing this piece, or how
Well, at the
what
time we
was
were
your
not
thinking?
in touch. We're
Right,
not friends
right,
or close anymore.
right.
And I took myself and my emotions out of the writing
Okay.
because it was a form of healing for me, and I had to get everything out of my head, everything, to feel better. And so I didn't ask for anybody's permission at all. What would they say? No. I didn't ask for any permission. And I think I changed the name, right? Use a pseudonym. And I think many people go through this same experience. I'm not the only one. I felt like I was the only one until I heard other people's stories. And I think just putting it in writing could help somebody along the way. I don't know. But they could see, strategies that I use to cope and learn something from it. So I took myself kind of out of the equation and just wrote what happened, what strategies I used. It's this is like a point by point guide what to do if you end up in a situation like that. Have some savings. Don't go to the most expensive hotel you can find because the savings don't last. Things like that. Practical.
Right. I mean, as writers, we have to write our truth.
Yes.
I mean, whether unfortunately, sometimes things that we may write, I mean, especially if it's a memoir or it might, it hurt other people. I mean, I remember talking to a really one of my teachers that wrote, actually, her first piece was a memoir of when she had left Colombia and went to Africa to live and stuff like that. And how, I mean, the way she wrote about her husband was not the most flattering point of it, but yet it was, in a way. And she talked in terms of, how he felt about it. And as writers, our responsibility to what we put out in the world. I mean, holding on to our truth, we have to write our truth. But I was just curious in terms of, because I mean, I think as all writers, we all come to that point of when we have to write, we decide to write about something that may be, a difficult point. But I really love what you have just read. I mean, it's really, I mean, you've sort of, I saw every moment of what was happening to you, and you really was really good in terms of telling us how you were feeling, which I think it's important. We need to know, we hear, the plot in terms of what's going on. Yes, this and this, and we move from here, the hotel, blah, blah. But how is the character? How is the person feeling? Did you ever get to a point where you sort of kind of step back into, well, I mean, you did say that, but I mean, did you at any point saw yourself as like a character as opposed to like somebody, do you know what I mean? Like being able to step back really far back in terms of as you write, as you continued writing.
Well, the book was published in 2014, which is 11 years ago. I can't believe so much time has passed. So when I read it last month before doing this presentation, and I really felt like a character in the book because I haven't looked at that book in years. And I read it and I thought, my God, did I write this? Did this happen to me? Because I forgot many of these stories. I've forgotten it so many years ago. We're talking about 2011, 2012. That's, so I felt like a character when I read the book last month. I had forgotten many of the stories, I guarantee you. It was like, but it actually happened. And so at that point, yes, I felt like a character. Not when I was writing it, because when I was writing it, I was just pouring everything out of my head. But rereading, if I reread any of the memoirs now, because I haven't written for quite a while, I will feel like a character in the book, yes. Okay, Alicia had a question.
Yeah, I'm really, really awed, for want of a better word, by your experiences. They are tremendous. And I think one of the things that stand out there for me is that you were willing to take risk. I think a lot of us, sometimes we are in situations, but we're not willing to take that risk because we're not too sure where it's going to lead, what is going to happen. But
Yes.
you did that, and I'm really, really proud of that fact that you would
Thank
have
you.
done that. Yeah, that was awesome. Do you know if your friend would have ever read your book? This book that has,
Oh, it's possible
okay.
because her brother is on my Facebook, so you would have seen the publication. It's possible.
Oh,
And it may have been quite upsetting,
yes, I can imagine.
but it's what happened.
Of course, it's
And
your reality.
when we
Yeah.
parted ways, I said thank you so much for hosting us. I know it was quite difficult.
Yeah,
to
because I had a
take
friend who had a
somebody's
similar
place.
experience.
Huh?
I had a friend who had a similar experience. At one point, I was in nursing, and a number of us were going to the US, and one would have gone before, and then the other one went up and she said, yes, you can come and stay by me and what have you and stuff like
Yes.
that. And then it turned out to be a horror story. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, many people have stories like this. So I do advise people, try to be independent. Even 1 week at somebody's house is enough. Even family, they get tired of you. They have good intentions. And so the intention was good. And I did say thank you so much for hosting us, but it's not going to work out. I didn't fight when I was leaving. I didn't say any bad things to her. Never, because I know it was a strain. If you have to work every day and people are in your house, you don't know what they're up to, it is a strain. So I would never say any bad things about my friend. It's a childhood friend from back home. And when we parted, I gave her a warm thank you because I know it was difficult for her, not just for us, for her in her house. So in my mind, I parted relatively amicably. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to
Yeah,
about
I've
writing.
had my hand up for about
Okay,
half
Althea,
an
one
hour
more and
now.
then we have to move on.
Okay. Well, my question is, would you say that you took the route of creative nonfiction in your memoir? What we
No,
call creative nonfiction.
I don't think so. I wrote what actually happened. I didn't write about everything. I had an editor from Ireland for the first book I wrote, and she said, you can't put everything, remove this, remove that. I was like, no, it's so important. But we had to cut it by half because it was too long. I had so many stories to tell. Now, all these stories are what happened or what I felt happened to me. And I don't know if you would call it creative nonfiction, but maybe, okay, creative in the sense of compartmentalizing topics. Like, let's say one chapter called The Commute is not chronological, so it's just on that topic, different dates, different months. So creative in that sense, compartmentalizing ideas into one chapter. All right. Now, thank you so much for the questions. Now I get to rest a little bit and listen. So, Cynthia Birch.
Actually, Krishna had wanted to make a little point, so we
Oh,
should.
okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Krishna had started to say something.
Oh, okay.
Krishna?
All right. Yeah, it was in line with the concerns of Arlene, Alicia, and now Althea. Had to do with your role as a writer.
Yes.
When you're writing, in your case, you say the memoirs. I see it as, you could see it as fictionalized autobiography. That's another way of looking at it. But
But
you,
it's not
as a writer,
fiction because the
I know,
events occurred.
I know, but
Mhm.
you're fictionalized some, right? Because you change the name.
Or
Did
the
you
names of the people. Well,
the,
that's to protect their
the
privacy.
correct and the events? Did you fictionalize some of the events, or you just
No, no, no. The events all happened.
okay?
I
All
wrote
right. So
what
what?
I remembered, but
Okay,
I changed people's names
right.
so that if others recognize them, I said, well, I
So
didn't put their actual name.
so what I'm
Just
saying is, as a writer, we have is a tightrope we walk, we tread between being truthful and being careful not to
yeah.
hurt the loved ones, not to hurt people we have interacted with and our loved ones. It is a tightrope. But I remember D.H. Lawrence in Sons and Lovers, his portrayal of his father. When he looked back at it, he said he didn't like that unflattering portrayal he did of his father, that perhaps he was too severe on him,
Okay.
at the time he wrote it.
Yes.
So I'm saying, as writers, we all walk this tightrope between being truthful and being careful. And it's up to each writer, I suppose, because there's risks you take. You take risks of alienating people, alienating your own family, alienating friends, alienating loved ones. You take the risk. But
I'm a risk taker,
Arlene,
Krishna.
huh?
I'm a big risk taker.
Yeah, but Arlene, so that's what we do, Arlene, as writers. We take the risk. And I think it's up to each writer to decide what where you have to tread carefully, or where you
Yes.
can walk
And to that
freely,
point,
walk freely. Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
I wrote about the workplace, one office where I worked without calling the name of the company or the characters. And somebody asked me one day if I wasn't afraid of being sued.
Yes, so
And I
that
said
comes
no.
up also.
I said no, because I should sue them for maltreatment and racism. Somebody asked me that chapter, I spoke about the people in the workplace, in particular the vice president for HR. Very rude, very racist comments towards me. I didn't put her name. And I was asked one time if I didn't think they would sue me. I said, well, I will sue them before they sue me for psychological damage. I wasn't damaged at all. I'm so used to it by now. You know, I don't care. I don't care. So I changed the names and say, okay, let's see. They can't do anything.
As a writer, quick question, when you're taking on an endeavor like this, did you have to go through a lawyer at any point to just make sure that
No.
you were protected?
No.
Okay.
And even if I did, I didn't do that. A lawyer? No.
Okay,
let me
just
just
was
say-
curious as you mentioned soon. I didn't know,
Let me
you
just
know, if
say-
someone
No,
takes on a
it's just
similar
a comment
project.
that one reader asked me one time. And the thought didn't even cross my mind.
Let me just say, Gusha, to extend that argument about lawyer and so on. I wrote a book of non-fiction about the school I taught at for 35 years. Okay? And I was threatened to be sued. And I had to alter a whole section of the book to avoid that development. I had to rewrite. I had to give another version of the book where I had to excise. I had to excise a whole section of the book. Well, one page. Let's say one page. So Gersha is correct to say, you know, we have to be careful.
But did you go through a lawyer, Krishna? Like you went to a lawyer for them to look at it?
I contacted
Okay.
Anand Ramlogan.
Okay.
The lawyer I taught us at sixth form.
Okay. All right. I know another author. She's a poet. She wrote a book, but a lot of her writings came from major events that happened in the country. One such event was when the doctor was doing a C-section and accidentally went a little too deep. And she had to take her work to a lawyer to kind of be filtered to ensure that, you know, she was protected as well. So I was just asking if taking on something like this, if yes, it's fiction, yes, we've changed the names, but is that, you know, something also has to be done with fiction?
Valid issue, valid question.
We should move on, or else we would not finish the readings.
Yeah.
Certainly, thank you.
Okay, let's move on, and then we can do some more question and answer afterwards. So the next topic, job search. Mrs. Birch, would you like to start your reading?
Thank you. I went online and mapped my way through the long journey from Stony Creek to Toronto to Markham. I had to take the Toronto subway very early in the morning to the last station, Finch, and then get a bus to Markham from there. The Toronto subway was easy to follow compared to the web of subway lines in New York City and the tube in London. I arrived at the subway at 7 a.m. Thousands of people were already on the go, as in any big city. The main difference I noticed here was that everyone was silent. I stood in the Bloor-Yonge station where two lines met. It was one of the busiest stations in Toronto. Everyone faced in the direction of the oncoming train. One could hear a pin drop. In another country, there would be music, laughter, talking, and general commotion as thousands moved around. Not Canadians. If anyone dared to speak, the whole crowd turned to stare at the person. It was like a scene from a bizarre movie. They may have all needed coffee to wake up. I boarded the York Regional bus to Markham, armed with maps and schedules. I was looking for East Beaver Creek, and we were stuck in early morning traffic. I heard the computerized voice on the bus say something about Beaver Creek, so I jumped out. However, after walking along for a block, I discovered this was West Beaver Creek, the wrong street. I asked a person who was passing for help, but he had no idea what I was talking about. The clock was ticking away for the interview time. Luckily, another bus approached. I told the driver I was lost, and thankfully, I did not have to pay again. It was a very expensive trip, but one had to invest in a possible job or be doomed. When I got out at East Beaver Creek, I followed the street numbers carefully. I walked and walked, slipping backwards on the icy pathway as I tried to find the office. Everyone flashed past me in cars. Nobody could be seen on foot for miles. They looked out their car windows at me as if I were an alien. The last part of the journey was the most difficult. What looked like a short walk on the map turned out to be an arduous trek in the snow for quite a few minutes. Finally, I was at the company building. It was a functional new warehouse. On entering the front door, there was a desk for the receptionist and nothing else. No seats, no plants, no coffee table. I got there exactly at 9 with no time to spare and checked in with the receptionist. She called the manager who would be interviewing me. She then asked if I wanted to hang my coat. In fact, I would have liked to take off all the leg warmers, extra sweaters, hat, mittens, and put on my high-heel shoes in the privacy of a lady's room. It would have been nice to fix my hair and retouch my makeup. However, there was no time for that. The manager rushed down and watched me take off the winter gear as I pushed everything into a tiny closet in the hallway. I also carried my lunch bag and the extra bag for wet boots. I was sure to put on my high-heel pumps to match the business suit and tried to breathe slowly to calm down. We went upstairs to his office for a chat. I went through my work history and why I felt I could perform well in the job. It turned out that the last QA manager who quit suddenly was also from Trinidad. That could have worked for or against me, depending on the opinion they formed of this man. If he left the job suddenly, it must not have been a favorable work environment. In my case, I felt desperate. I was shuffled through the factory to see the facilities and meet the research manager and others. After an hour, I put back on my winter gear and began the long journey back to Stony Creek. How many long and expensive journeys was I going to have to endure to find the perfect job? At least I was getting interviews, I thought. It was better than no activity. The next week, I was called back to the company in Markham for a second interview. I thought this was very good news. It probably meant I was in the race for the finish. I was bold enough to ask the hiring manager how many candidates he was interviewing. It turned out they were down to the last 2. I gave myself enough time to get there. The morning traffic was heavy and I did not want to be late or arrive at the last minute as before. I was early this time and I had a few spare minutes to have a chat with the receptionist. She was a lovely young Nigerian woman with a warm, friendly face. She answered one call after the other and said good morning to all who entered. "How did you get here?" she asked. Oh, I took the bus, I announced with pride. She looked at me and frowned intensely. You're probably in the running for this job. Don't tell them you don't own a car. What do you mean? I asked in surprise. Don't tell anyone you don't have a car. They would hate to have a manager without a car. You would never get the job. It was surprising to me that a hiring decision could be based on car ownership instead of ability to do a job. I was shunted from one room to the next to meet managers of different programs. I had studied their backgrounds so I could figure out how to flatter them. Two of them said with great enthusiasm that they worked late every day and came into work on weekends. I was never impressed by such a statement. To me, this was a sign of understaffing and overworking existing staff. This was a fair warning if ever there was one. I asked the pair what company's social programs existed. Do you go out to happy hour on Fridays after work? Is there a Christmas party? Do you have a social committee? I asked. It was their turn to give me a confused stare and feel uncomfortable. They probably thought I was not a serious employee. I dared to speak about socializing. If they did not understand what it meant to have social programs, it was another warning sign. One manager said the last person left without stating what was his problem. If someone felt an injustice was done, it should be stated. From the little I saw of Canadians and their behavior, I knew he did not mean what he said. Canadians were not expressive like other cultures. They were very polite, whether angry or not. Nobody would dare speak his mind. I told Mr. Outspoken that I would usually have meetings regularly so staff could voice their opinions. He looked at me unsure of what to say. I then waited until the general manager was free to speak with me. He seemed like a friendly soul and went through my resume line by line. In order to fit everything into the standard Canadian two-page resume, I left out most of my early industrial experience. The general manager skimmed through the 2 pages and summed up I had 10 years of experience. Of course, that was all I put because the recruiters advised me not to put anything more. He wanted me to convince him I could handle a job in food canning, even though there was nothing on the resume. Well, in fact, my first job in the industry was over 20 years ago when I left high school, I said. Then I got carried away. I outlined all my past experience and all my international travel to South America and Europe auditing food companies. It was the death of me. Too much information was provided. He looked more afraid than impressed. The next day, I got the "We regret" email. It was the most dreaded email message, but at least it was correspondence. I did not hear from the company in Mississauga for a week and decided to send an email message to ask about the outcome. The manager responded that day. Sorry for the delay. We decided to go with another candidate who has already done work in this field. I was devastated and sobbed for hours. A great deal of time, money, and effort were invested in these searches. And I knew I could have done these jobs very well. What were they looking for? Another interview opportunity came up for food safety auditor. I rented a car for one day and drove to a technology center out in Guelph for an interview. The rental fee and expensive car insurance were surely going to eat into my dwindling savings. Everything depended on this interview. With all my years of experience, I thought they would surely want to hire me. It was a behavioral interview. A panel of 4 persons fired questions from different directions and then stared at me. I tried to keep as calm as possible so as not to crack under their pressure. I had audited food companies in the past. whatever they needed, I was sure I had the skills. This company never responded to my follow-up email messages. There was no email message starting with "we regret" or any further communication. So that's the end of this section of job search. I wonder whether,
Okay, I think
In-
we would
in
be
the
able to do
interest
the
of time,
second
yes.
part in the
in the interest of time,
Yes.
that's exactly what I was saying. Yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you so
Perfect.
much, Mrs. Birch.
Cynthia, you're welcome.
Cynthia. So does anyone have any comment or query to ask about the job search? Now, we didn't get to read the part, one of my comments, or several pages I wrote about dumbing down to get the job, having to write the most flimsy resumes because a lot of people, recruiters told me hiring managers wouldn't have half of my qualifications. So there's no point sending a detailed resume to them. If the job said 5 years experience, you put 5 years. If they ask for a bachelor's degree, you put bachelor's. Don't tell anybody anything about your qualifications because you wouldn't get a job. But that is the kind of work climate that exists in Toronto, and nepotism. Friend of a friend gets a job, qualified or not, because it's a friend or family. So the whole chapter talks about that. Any questions or comments on this topic?
Well, I could identify with that, Jenny Lynn, living in
Yes.
Canada still. I had to almost like recreate my own niche. And what happened with me was like, you can't be more qualified than the people that are hiring you.
Yes.
And especially if you're of color, because they've
That's it.
already got it fixed in their minds that people of color are inferior.
That's right.
So you can't be better than they are. You can't know more than they do.
That's it.
And so the dumbing down thing is true. And I always hated to do that because nobody gave me a degree. I had to earn it.
That's right.
You know, you pay for it, yes, but you don't get it just because you pay for it. If you don't do the work, you don't get it. So anyway, it's all about merit. But anyway, the way I kept my job for decades at the local newspaper was I was sight unseen. I worked from home. They sent me an email. They said, go interview this company, do a write-up on it.
Yes.
Then I would email my work back into them. So Heather Ferguson sounded Caucasian enough.
Oh yes, Ferguson.
And I didn't use my middle name, my maiden name, Lautu.
Yes.
And so I emailed my work in. So they just thought, I don't know what they thought they were dealing with. And then they would just mail me my paycheck. And I carried on like that for 20 years. And that was how I got through working where I did.
Yeah, we had to find coping strategies. Yeah. Excellent example. Fantastic. Yeah. Because, you know, after I found out about dumbing down the resume, I still had to go for interviews. And I remember walking in for the interview, and, you know, my name is quite English looking name, so they don't know who's coming. And then when I show up, they say, you are Jenny Lynn. Yes, I am. And
you can see the shock on their faces sometimes.
Yes,
they cannot hide it.
No, sweating and, you know, just anxious to get you out. One place, you know, like my hands, I was speaking with my hands and the girl watched my hand going round and round. She had never heard of McGill University. And I was thinking, McGill, one of the most renowned universities in Canada. Never heard of it, never. And you're a hiring manager. So it was quite an eye-opener, really. And a lot of pain and suffering, the worst pain and suffering I've ever experienced, really. And to tell you the truth, the US was not like that. Even though Canadians would say, oh, it's terrible in the US. No, I was hired based on merit for the jobs that I got in the US and paid very well. Very well. like total strangers who didn't know me. It wasn't any father's friend or anything. Nobody. They looked at my resume. I did well in the interview, and I was hired based on merit. So completely different. I found the US, working in the US, competitive. The US companies are competitive, and they wanted the best, most highly skilled workers. Now, I don't know what it's like now, because, I'm talking about the past, but they really were expecting the most competitive character or person for the job. And they would reward you financially for that.
Well, let's just put it this way. I'm glad I'm retired and doing my own thing.
Yes, yes. Anybody else has any comment or question about this topic?
Yes.
Jobs.
Hi. I think it's about the topic and your overall book, because it's 400 and something pages.
Yes.
Which, wow, that's really a lot of work. So while you were writing it, in terms of like, because you have all of this experience, I mean, you have
Yes.
all of these stories, did you find like going through, well, which one do I want to highlight? Do you know what I mean? Because, we
Yeah,
can't
that was
do it all
difficult.
because it's like,
That
that's
was
1,000
difficult
pages, right?
because I had so many stories.
Right. So
I just
go ahead.
I just tried to pick the ones that were most significant, and I thought people could relate to the story, or the one that maybe hurt me the most. I put that in because there were many experiences.
Right.
One thing I wanted to highlight too was the preferential treatment for new immigrants. Here I was a citizen, and I couldn't get, or I didn't know where to go, let me put it that way, to get help in reviewing my resume, and I didn't know where to go. So I went to a center for new immigrants, fresh off the plane from Somalia or wherever. I ended up there, and I thought, my God, why am I here? Look at these people. They don't even know how to dress for winter, but the services were available to them. So I said, well, if they could get that for free, let me try. It was so all the most profound experiences. I put those in the book. Of course, there were many others, but I had to couldn't keep writing and writing. So the ones that affected me the most.
Right. Would you say the ones, when you say the ones that affected you the most, in terms of, I mean, as a writer, the one that has the most tension? Because I mean, as the reader is reading the book, I mean, they're sort of like going for the heat, you know what I mean? Where the tension is, and how, how this person, how they are at the beginning of the book, and what happens, how they change at the end. What are the changes, Otherwise, just sort of for the progression of the book, just in terms of
the progression.
what's,
now, when I was writing it,
what is being resolved.
I didn't think of progression too much because the book writing was therapeutic. And so anything that I found traumatic, I just wrote about it.
Right.
And I didn't think about, certain writing styles, because remember, I didn't study writing. I wrote as a storyteller. Okay.
Right.
So somebody who studied creative writing would have approached it differently, I imagine.
Right.
For me, it was like a diary. And I do keep journals. I keep journals, everything that I have to this day, because the last move here will probably be a book one day. I don't know.
Right.
But I keep journals. So I went through my journals and I saw, oh yes, this happened. And so because
I think
diaries with notes and all that
right.
helped.
I mean, because every writer has their own approach. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I think in terms of, I like the idea that you brought on, the idea of the diary or the journal. I think in terms of when I am writing about my feelings,
yes,
I'm writing in my journal, okay, and I am like just
Yes.
whatever I'm feeling. But that's not what is going to go in my book.
Why
I mean,
not?
I can read that journal and say, okay, those are my feelings, and that's that's my stuff. You know what I mean? If I go through it, I can say that's my stuff. Okay. So I think that, and I'm not saying anything in terms of what you're writing about, okay?
Mhm.
But I was just thinking the whole idea of our truth. I mean, Krishna talked about it in terms of our responsibility, or I feel as me as a writer, my responsibility of what I put out there in the world, um, especially if it's about somebody else. I want to be able to say my truth, but being able to say it in a way where there is some understanding. And also, I don't want to, I'm not preaching here, but I just want to say, in terms of like, ultimately for me, the book is about art. It's about creating art,
Mhm.
and how do you take some stuff and then add to it in terms of it becomes a piece of art. We not
Well, you
always
see,
get there, but I mean,
what you
these days
have
as a writer, I'm
described,
trying to get there.
you're describing curating your creation, your art. And I don't like to live a curated life.
I'm not creating.
No,
I'm not,
when you say you take your journal, but then you would adjust it if you
no,
would.
no. What I'm saying
I don't
is,
understand.
what I'm saying is, if I'm writing, if I'm writing something about my feelings, like say something happened to me today, and I say,
Yeah.
"Oh," and I go in the morning and I'm writing about it, and then I'm just like, excuse the word that I'm using, vomiting up my stuff.
Yes.
All right. Now I can look at that and I can look at it and say, wait a minute. Yeah, okay, that's good. That's my feelings. But then when I get in front of a blank piece of paper and say I'm going to write, something, write about this woman, and I write fiction. But even
Oh,
if I'm pulling from my own stuff, write about that stuff, somehow it my own stuff becomes boring. For me, it's boring. My own feelings, my vomiting of something is boring compared to what I can create through my imagination of what's
yeah.
happening to this woman or what's going on here. It might be the same thing. It might be, oh my God, my husband, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to write about this. But then if I write about what's going on with me, or I don't want to say my husband is a wonderful as a doll, but if I write about it's boring. I want something that's like more tension and more something that's happening. And I can do that through my own imagination. So I'm not saying that you haven't done that, you know what I mean? Because I mean, so far what I'm reading is really wonderful and stuff. But you brought up the whole thing about the diary and the feelings. And I just kind of struck me of how writers approach things in different ways.
Yes, yes.
And I'm
Because
not
a
curating
lot
this,
of time had passed and I was trying to remember what happened to me.
right?
So I have I'll show you an example, not exactly a diary, but a journal. I have copies of journals from every single year since I don't know which year. And I
Right,
would go through and say, oh, January 12th, this is what happened. Just a scribble, a scribble. But
right,
once I look at that, it jogs the memory. And I say, oh, yeah, that's what happened to me that day.
right.
And
Yeah. Well,
and I
that's
remember, like I could remember things for the past 5 years in detail. But you know what? Thank you so much. We are going to move on to the next topic because, we're running out of time. We don't want to run out of time. So thank you so much, Arlene, for your comments. Now, Mutilal is going to read about my journey as an artist, the beginning. So I call that artist extraordinaire.
Thank you. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, well, my piece is kind of like an artist. I signed up for another summer festival to try my luck. As a newcomer, I did not know which events were best. I got the name and number from the organizer of a festival called Carabram in a town called Brampton, relatively close to Toronto. I asked if I could sell some of my bottled sauces, knowing that food would sell faster than art. She said it was fine, so I booked a van from the local auto rental and waited for the weekend to arrive. Setup was on the Friday afternoon before the event. When I went to the auto rental facility, they could not find my reservation in their records. What was the meaning of this? I'd already brought some paintings, cards, boxes of sauces, and countless other things down the staircase onto the porch, ready for loading. What was I to do? The service agent said he had a 16-foot van and it was all he could offer. I would have to return it at night, however, because someone booked the van for a move on Saturday morning. I told him it was no problem. The last time I drove a 16-foot van was at my first festival in Dublin, Ireland. This was deja vu, except I did not want to have any accident or scrapes on the way. It was no problem starting and driving the monstrous van. I loaded many boxes of sauce, all the cards I could carry, and a few paintings. My past experience of trying to show paintings at a festival taught me not to take too many. I took enough paintings for a backdrop, then many prints and cheaper items to sell. As predicted, the sauces were the most attractive to the crowds. I opened samples for tasting. The food sold, but the crowd barely noticed the paintings and saw them as decorations for the hall in the event. Everyone wanted food to eat. I was lucky to meet up with some long lost childhood friends who lived in Brampton. They were able to keep my leftover stock at their homes until I could come back to collect them, since I had to take 2 buses on a train to get to the venue. I managed to sell a few boxes of sauces, but the artwork was a struggle. A new friend invited me to participate in another festival. This time, it was Carasagua in Mississauga. This was supposed to be a bigger and better event. There were many neighborhoods in the village with large houses. Maybe these people needed paintings, my friend said. Well, I was willing to try it. The event was at a remote venue, so I decided to rent a car for the weekend to travel back and forth easily. If I got big sales, then it would be worth the expense. I took quite a few paintings and displayed them on easels so the passing crowd could see them clearly. I took a few small paintings stuck on the table provided. The organizers were obsessed with the quality of the tablecloth I brought. It was to be fire retardant. I was not allowed to bring any food items. After debating about my tablecloth, they brought a more suitable one for me. We set up early on Friday afternoon and waited for the large crowd to come at night. A few people trickled through the venue, but not enough to notice what was in front of them. Food vendors attracted the highest foot traffic. They will come in droves, and one person who sold at this event in the past. We were part of the Caribbean Pavilion. I went back on Saturday morning full of hope. I placed a large painting of an orchid close to the path so passers-by could have a close-up view. A few people stopped and looked at the oil paintings in awe. Then they looked at me. Many took photographs next to the painting. I felt like I was watching an event in a remote village in a third world country. The attendees were of all different nationalities, but behaved as if they have never seen a painting in their lives. One man wiped his hand on the front of the painting, then tugged at the back of the canvas to see if it was real. This behavior was a bit alarming. I immediately moved the easel to safety behind the table. If I was not making any money, I was not going to let them destroy my work. One woman looked at the paintings and then looked at me and said, "These are very good. You are kind of like an artist." Perhaps in her mind, I should not have been able to paint that beautiful flowers and portraits she saw. A painter was supposed to be an old Frenchman with a beret. I was sure to take home all my original paintings in the evening, leaving only one behind the table as a backdrop for the stall. The Sunday crowd was no different. I sold 2 cards and never recovered the cost of the stand. I vowed not to do any festivals again. I would seek out only art and craft shows and see where they led. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mutilal. In the interest of time, we'll just do the first reading, but thank you so much. Yeah, it was quite difficult to get started as an artist, to not be perceived as an artist, because people were not
Exactly.
used to seeing a Black woman as an artist. They really were not, and I would show all this art. They look at me, they look at the art, look at me, look at the artist. How is this possible? And this is in the 21st century, okay? The 21st century. They didn't expect somebody who looked like me to be an artist. And I went through that at multiple occasions in the big city of Toronto. And so I tried all kinds of events. Usually at festivals, they line up by, some fries and a rose cone, and that's it. Art was out of the question. So in the chapter, I put several stories like that until I could find collectives of artists where the people who came to the event expected to see art and nothing else. And even then, at that time, I found the art was quite macabre, kind of blood and gore, dark themes. That was the kind of art that people tended to buy at that time, not colorful art. And so I had stories of people being horrified at my colorful art because they thought I wasn't a serious artist, too much color. Can you imagine? Too much color. I'm not serious. So it was
Okay.
traumatic to say the least, and very, very strange experience. Anyway, anybody has any comments about the art reading or
I,
in
I,
general?
I just want to say that we and the world are indeed lucky that you did not get discouraged and stop with your artistic
Yes,
endeavors. This
to
kind of
this
remind me
day.
of opera I saw in London many years ago, La Boheme,
Oh, yes.
where the artists were starving and they were throwing their writings and paintings in a fire to keep them warm. So I want to congratulate you for persevering, and we are
Thank you.
very grateful and we are very lucky to have you with us on Poetry and Prose. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Talk about persevering. I still persevere to this day, churning out art because I can't help myself. I love to paint. But I have a huge collection just waiting for the right buyers. I don't know when they'll show up. But anyway, thank you so much for your reading. And now, anybody else has any question or comment about the art? If not, we will go on to the next topic. Gersha is going to read Blood for Money.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to read your work. My piece is quite a bit long, so I will read and then for a few and then
Cut out
stop.
a few pieces, yes.
Yeah. The main light was turned off. One or two people who brought tablets or computers played on their gadgets to pass the time. Others went out to the main room to watch television. I closed my eyes and waited for sleep. We were awoken at 5 a.m. to prepare. Any moment of sleep before the bloodletting was a blessing. I tossed and turned all night, listening to the breathing strangers around me. Every cough and turn was amplified. One person woke 3 times to go to the bathroom. Every time she opened the door, the light shone in and disturbed those who were awake like me. 2 were heavy snorers and disturbed everyone. We wished they would be quiet. They were the lucky ones, stealing all the sleep from us. Ladies, time to wake up. The voice came through a haze. I was finally sleeping. How dare they disturb my rest? I sat up and realized I was at the top of a bunk bed and in a room full of strangers who were lazily rising. Some ran to the showers to be first, others dressed. I put on my track pants and 2 layers on top, my socks and bedroom slippers. I wanted to be comfortable to sit around all day. They called subjects by number to put in the catheter in their arms. When it was my turn, I was very nervous. Would I be infected by some dirty needle? Was this device safe? I looked at the others who went before me, the regulars. They were confident. I tried to be confident too. They obviously knew everything would be fine. One lady told me to keep my arm warm so the blood would not dry up at the end of the carpetha. Hold on. It's a switch page. She and her friend took their assigned towels and wrapped them around their arms with the device. Ouch, I yelled when I got stuck with the needle. Don't worry, someone said. Just think, you won't have to be stuck so many times today because you have to put this in. When the technicians had installed the catheters for most people, I saw one girl pack up her things and get escorted out of the room. What happened? What happened? Everyone whispered as we sat at our assigned places, which were numbered on the sofas. She stayed overnight like the rest of us. I wondered what went wrong. We were called in one by one for heart rate and blood pressure measurements, and then asked to go back to our assigned seats. As this was taking place, the head of the lab coat crowd, whom I thought might have been a doctor, gave out instructions. She described the morning's proceedings in detail. A few men were chattering, and she screamed at them to listen to her. She described how we would be taken to another room to get the medication, 2 pills. They were to be swallowed whole without chewing. Then we had to drink all the water given with the pills. After we swallowed the pills, the technician would ask us to show our hands and look into our mouths and under our tongues using a flashlight to make sure there were no remnants were seen. After this, we would return to the room to have blood samples taken at timed intervals. After taking the tablet, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 2 hours, etc. The bathrooms and bedrooms would be locked for the first 4 hours. If we needed to use the bathroom, we needed to do so right away. If we wanted books for reading or anything else, we were to remove these from our bedrooms right away. Bathroom use would be closely monitored and recorded after taking the pills. My God, I shuddered. They were going to monitor our every move. I was number 15. I surveyed number 14 and number 16 on the sofa beside me. Number 16 was a tiny Malaysian woman with round eyes, medium-length brown hair, and a broad and friendly smile. She told me she had done the studies last year and came back again. When they called her number and she disappeared, within 2 minutes, I heard my number called. I walked to the back door and waited my fate. I saw the lab coat-clad workers performing different tasks. Some were timing with clipboards, some were observing, others were pouring water into cups, and others were dispensing pills. One of them shouted instructions to a young black man. Swallow the tablet whole, do not chew it. Drink all the water in the cup. When you finish, I'll look in your mouth with a flashlight. He swallowed the tablet and drank the water as instructed. Hands in the air, the technician said. He put his hands in the air and looked up. It reminded me of a scene from a military movie. Open your mouth. Stick out your tongue so I can see. She wielded a flashlight. He had to stick out his tongue upwards, then to the right and to the left. He looked like a horse. I would also have to go through this horse routine. How humiliating. I supposed everyone was focused on the reward of $1,100. A small humiliation was worth the prize at the end of it all. The black man returned to the room and sat in his spot. The Malaysian woman was next. She followed instructions, and she too looked like a horse whose teeth were being examined for sale at the horse trading fair. Number 15, the voice called. Reduced to a number, I thought. Why not use people's names? I listened to the instructions for the umpteenth time. They were required to repeat the instructions for each subject. What a job. I put the tablet in my mouth. It was bitter and foul. I swallowed immediately. It was not too big, so I was able to swallow it without water. I did not drink very quickly under normal circumstances. So drinking a full cup of water while 5 people observed me was going to be a challenge. I tried not to choke or regurgitate the tablet. I would be put out for sure. Since we would not be allowed any water for 4 hours, I forced myself to drink it, so my stomach would have something in it. I imagined having an empty stomach from fasting would soon promote absorption of whatever drug they gave us. Lift up your tongue, said the lab technician. The witch with the flashlight looked to see if I had hid the tablet under my tongue or in my cheeks. Satisfied with the outcome, she sent me on my way for further observation. They were looking for side effects of the drug. When I entered the large sitting room, a crew started drawing blood from the first subjects. Blood would be taken at half-hour intervals, in rotation around the room as we sat upright watching the TV screen. The Malaysian woman talked too much. I learned about her family, her son, who studied at a university in Toronto and then moved to Australia, her brothers and her sister, who were wealthy in Malaysia, her old job, her new job, and the other things I did not need to know. I wanted silence as I contemplated my fate as a human guinea pig. The woman on the other side of me looked weathered by time. Her face was made of a multitude of folds. Her gray hair was in a short cut hair. Her thin lips were in a permanent frown. Her short, tanned limbs were sturdy from hard physical labor, and her eyes were a piercing blue. She sat quietly reading a magazine. I wondered if she would strike up a conversation. I decided to speak to her first to get a break from the prattling neighbor on my left. So I'm going to stop there.
Okay, thank
Don't
you
wanna
so
go
much,
through.
Grisha.
My
Does
pleasure.
anyone have any comment on this Blood for Money, this chapter? Now, just keep in mind, I was living in an expensive big city, couldn't find a job despite having many qualifications and experience. And so a friend of mine who I'd met in Ireland, there's a friend, Farida, she lived in Montreal and she had moved back from Ireland to Montreal, and she told me this is what she did to make extra money. It wasn't taxed and I should try it. At first I was horrified. And then, the risk-taker that I am, I said, you know what? Are we going to starve or am I just going to try it? So I went. And it was an interesting experience. I used it, you know, of course, to get the check, but also to see this bubble, this activity, and the people who were there. I imagined that I was in a movie, literally, because it couldn't be happening to me. I couldn't be in this place, but I was. So I studied the characters and, without calling any names or anything like that, I found it was a good chapter for the book. Just turning around a horrible experience into something interesting for people to read, another side of life that many would know nothing about. Any comments, questions? Yes? Okay, let us go on since we have no comments. The commute. So Heather, you're going to read part of this. Maybe you can read the part where we're stuck underground in the subway.
Well, that's scary.
Yes.
And I can identify because some of the stops I knew from when I lived there.
Right.
Trapped underground. Life in the subway was a culture of its own. One day I saw spilled coffee running down the middle of an aisle and became motivated to write a poem. Spilled coffee. They stepped gingerly around the caramel streams as they trickled down the center of the aisle. Someone left a memory behind. Who would do this? One of the thousands in the transit who in the morning trance holds a cup in the right hand, balancing a bag in the left. Don't come too close to me, I protested silently as a swaying cup entered my space. Go over that way. I'm wearing white trousers. The sleepy cup holder was unaware. The train stopped and more people piled through the doors. Noses turned up. Faces looked in disgust. The caramel stream spread further. Perpetrator long gone. An empty cup rolled under a seat. One step, two step. Big men feigned ballet petit pas. I counted 4 streams of caramel brown. It must have been a latte, not too dark. The train chimed and we were off. Newspaper readers looked away. One reader fixed the problem while others walked past. The silence was deafening as he placed one sheet of paper after another on the floor. A partial stream disappeared in front of him. It soaked up. The train stopped and he floated out. More commuters piled in and the dance continued on the floor. It is interesting the way the socio-economic class of commuters change at different hours during the morning commute. Up to 6:30 a.m., the commuters wore basic clothing and carried plastic coolers and containers with one or more meals. These commuters probably worked at factories or construction sites. For the most part, they looked like new immigrants of different races. The people I saw on the early morning commute may have been minimum wage workers. If not, they were certainly commuting very long distances for an office job. The wage slaves, as I affectionately called us. We were all tired from lack of sleep and the pain of waking up too early in the morning to go to a job primarily for financial gain. There was no joy, no contentment, just the obligation to rise early to make money. The commuters who traveled after 8 a.m. appeared to be middle income earners. They wore expensive clothing and carried the coach handbags. Some sported beautiful watches and jewelry, and female commuters were definitely better groomed with makeup and fancy haircuts. These commuters were more settled and probably second or third generation city dwellers. They tried to appear wealthy at all costs and worship luxury items. The person who did not sport some brand name item was silently despised. One was to be snubbed and overlooked despite the size of one's bank account. During the commute, one would often hear announcements about a delay because of a customer alarm being pulled. There would be a delay for medical emergencies, a fire alarm, or a malfunctioning track. On many occasions, the announcement would be muffled and difficult to understand. Everyone tried intently to hear what was being said and breathe a sigh of relief if the delay was on a different track or going in a different direction. The delay didn't last too long. During the rush hour, but a 5-minute stop could cause commuters to miss their bus connections and face a longer wait before getting to their destination. One fine morning, as I started the morning commute to Finch Station, I heard a muffled announcement on the Bloor Danforth line about signal problems on the Young University Spadina line going to North York. I thought nothing of this and hoped the problem would clear by the time I changed train tracks. I immersed myself in the morning newspaper and ceased to focus on the announcements, even though they continued. As I changed from the Bloor Danforth platform to the Young University Spadina platform going north, I noticed an excessive number of people waiting to board the train. This was because trains were so slow that more and more commuters began piling onto the platform, and very few trains were running to whisk people away. The loudspeaker blared instructions to the irate commuters who feared being late for work. A train is entering the station at the northbound platform. Please keep behind the yellow line. Allow passengers to leave the train before entering. The notices constantly reminded passengers to observe good train etiquette. People came close to the edge of the platform and stood on either side of the opening doors to allow passengers to leave. Then they scrambled into the train to grab any available seats. Don't charge the doors, went the loudspeaker. Stand away from the doors so they can close. The train was full to capacity and people tried to squeeze in any small crevice they could find. Unfortunately, some were in the doorway or knapsacks were caught as doors closed. We had to squeeze in even more. Departure was delayed and a few more seconds as the angry commuters heaved silently. We finally began the slow crawl northbound and stopped at Rosedale Station. Very few passengers got off there. However, many wanted to enter the train. All standing passengers readjusted to let in a trickle of new passengers. I was holding onto a metal pole and had to turn around and find another part of the pole to hang on to while staring at the back of a tall man's head. How long could I enjoy this view? I asked myself. I would have to shift in another direction at the next stop. We were all experiencing signal problems at the North York station. You will experience longer than normal travel times northbound on the Young University Spadina line. The loudspeaker cracked and annoyed passengers. Not only were we packed in like sardines, we were forced to listen to the awful noise of the loudspeaker delivering bad news. The train is stopping at Summerhill Station. Please take all your belongings as you leave the train, said the recording. Very few passengers left the train. Many more wanted to embark. Again, we breathed in to make room for them. This time I changed position and turned to face some seated passengers. They were certainly lucky to have seats that morning. At least they could read a newspaper and pretend everything was fine. As a standing passenger, one had to hang on for dear life and try not to bump into anyone as the train started and stopped. We dragged along, stopping at St. Clair Station, then Davisville. I could barely breathe at that point. We were packed so tightly, I just had to wait. Between Davisville and Eglinton Station, the train stopped. We were stuck underground. There was no announcement, no movement, just silence. Nobody spoke. I looked out the window and saw a tall, dark wall. We waited for what seemed like an eternity. It was at that point I felt my heart jump. The carriage was stuffy, even though the air conditioning unit was working and the cold air was blowing to cool down the summer heat. The train was overcrowded. What if we could not move again? What if the lights went out? What if people panicked? We would all be crushed. There was no escape. We were in between two stations and packed like rats in an overcrowded train carriage. If people panicked and I tried to get out, where would we go? There was no way out. I almost began to cry. I felt like collapsing to the ground as my knees buckled. I looked at the silent faces around me as people waited and hoped the train would start to move again. I started to pray silently for my life, my child, a safe deliverance, anything I could think of. I tried to distract myself so I wouldn't collapse from fear. Just then I spotted a familiar face seated near to where I was standing. I saw this woman on several occasions on the Markham commuter bus in the past and said good morning to her. I decided to start up a conversation with her to deflect attention from our plight. We were trapped underground and could do nothing about it. What a morning, I said. We've been underground at least an hour now. She shook her head. It is terrible. What can we do? This is the worst journey ever. I left home early and now I will have to be late for work, she lamented, shaking her head. We exchanged our woeful stories and waited for what seemed like an eternity. The more I talked, the more relieved I felt. About 10 minutes later, the engine of the train cranked up and we started to move. This train is going out of service. Please leave the train at Eglinton Station, speaker blared. I was so happy to get off that train, or moving coffin, as I imagined it to be. The pure terror of being underground and trapped still haunted me. It felt good to be in a space where I could run to the surface if necessary. I pondered whether I should just go upstairs to the bus depot and take a bus home. How was I going to have the courage to board another train and take a slow, disjointed ride to the end of this line? I chatted with my fellow commuter, bemoaning the fact that we would have to squeeze into another overcrowded train to continue the journey to Finch Station ahead. Another train
Okay, I
came.
have to, I'm going to interrupt you, Heather, because in the interest of time, but thank you so much for reading
Okay.
that passage. And you know, as you were reading it, the emotions came back again and I was breathing heavily because it was traumatic, absolutely traumatic, being stuck in between stations and there was no way to get out. No way to get out. If somebody screamed and panicked, I mean, it would be a stampede to nowhere because there was no way out of the train. It was
Well,
one of
that's where the
the
Canadian lack of expression is a good thing because people, aren't expressive, so they wouldn't
yes,
probably likely panic. But I could feel the panic as well because I've been on those subways.
yes.
Yeah. So
And packed in like rats, no way out. And if we had stopped at a station, we could just probably walk out. But we were
yeah,
in between stations underground, and all you could see was a wall.
yeah.
Now, I don't know if there were emergency exits. Nobody knew. But it was one of the most traumatic experiences underground. And I had a responsibility to head to work because I was a manager at this company. And so to board a new train and continue, it was very difficult, very difficult. Anyway, thank you so much. Does anyone have any comments or query about this reading? Gersha, I know it's
Yeah, but I would still love for Althea to read if she's willing. She's
okay.
our last reader for today.
Yeah. So we can read one of the section on the hair effect. Maybe it was the last one, 83 to 88. Althea, if you want to read that one. 383. Let's see.
I think the first one may be shorter for her.
It's shorter? Oh,
It's
okay.
381 to 3.
Oh, yes.
Okay, pages 283. Good morning, Jenny Lynn said,
Yes,
as he
hello.
tried very hard to keep a straight face. His jaws clenched as if wanting to say more, but not being able to. He walked past quickly. Hello, how are you today? I said, as I ambled to my desk at the back of the office. During the weekly meeting, one manager remarked, I look different every time he saw me. He did not notice me until Thursday, even though our office space was very small by international standards. I noticed my change made other people question themselves and their motivation for not paying attention to their physical appearance. Following week, one woman came in with her hair open and a slight perm, which gave her straight brown hair a few waves. She would always wear her hair pulled back in a bun. Everyone praised her for her courage. It was a strange word to use, since her straight hair would grow back eventually. How much courage was needed to wear this hairstyle? She lasted 2 days and was back to wearing her hair in one bun. She said her son did not like her hairstyle. After a visit to Trinidad and Tobago for Christmas, I returned with a very short haircut. My hair was damaged accidentally, and I was forced to cut it off, start new growth. This was the first time in my life I wanted a short haircut. It was also a traumatic experience for me. I never got used to looking at myself in the mirror. When I returned to work with my short boy cut in January, the office was in shock. The comments came from all directions. What happened? Lost all your hair. I admire you for your bravery. You look cute. I could never do it. I would die without my hair. If they only knew it was a cosmetic accident and not planned. The dust died down after the first week, and the microenvironment resumed its robotic pace with very little excitement day to day. In the meantime, my hair started growing back. I would put cream or curl activator and little else. By June, I used a headband to pull back the new growth. One day, as I combed out my hair while dressing for work, I saw the beautiful large afro that developed over time. I looked like a 1970s afro chick. I decided not to use the headband that day and leave my hair just as it was. Why should I hide my gorgeous locks? As I was entering the office, the HR VP was on her way to the ladies' room. She was an Asian with a heart-shaped face, olive skin, a face that showed signs of youth acne, and knees that bent inwards and touched, affectionately called K-foot in Trinidadian dialect. Her hair was dyed brown with highlights and straightened to perfection. She was flat from all angles and slim enough even though she was perpetually on a diet. She was a brash woman who said the first thing that came to her head. She stared at me and said, "What is wrong with your hair?" What? I was shocked at her comment. So surprised, in fact, I could not formulate an answer. She continued walking toward the ladies' room, completely oblivious to her offensive comment. I entered the office and walked to my desk in a daze, unsure of what just happened. On the way to my desk, a few people noticed my afro. One commented saying, "Groovy, baby." Now that was funny. After boiling and stewing over the HR VP's comment, I knew it was definitely racist. Did she not know that I was Black and that Black people would have this type of hair? Was she implying my wigs or chemically straightened hair were correct, while the African woolly hair was wrong? After discussing the matter with the only other Black woman in the office, I decided to go and ask Ms. HR what she meant by her question this morning. Being politically correct in such a diverse office was not easy. However, if the person responsible for human resources in the company did not respect diversity in the workplace, this had to be addressed. I went to her office where she was seated behind the desk working on her computer. She looked up and asked if she could spare me. She looked up and I asked if she could spare me a moment. Yes, of course, she said. I was very offended by what you said this morning. You asked what was wrong with my hair. I challenged. She twitched uncontrollably as she tried to make excuses for her comment and come up with everything but an apology. Oh, it was just a translation from my language. I just made a mistake in English. What could she possibly be translating from the Malaysian language into English? Everyone knows the difference between right and wrong. Oh, I meant to say you look different. No harm was meant. I always find you look so good despite your age. I know your age, you know. She smiled with a twinkle in her eyes. Of course, she knew my age. I gave HR my driver's license to copy so they could have my identification on the record when I started work at the company. I did not expect anyone to be brandishing my age as a weapon against which I should be judged. So here she was, not only being a racist, but ageism came into play. You always dress very professionally, even though you don't have a car, she reasoned. The comment was so disgusting, I decided to leave before having to file a lawsuit for discrimination based on the mode of transport to work. I knew some people were obsessed by material things, but this woman was taking it too far. Who should I complain to? HR? She was in charge of HR and possessed neither tact nor common decency. She was completely unaware of other people's feelings. A true robot, if there ever was one. Walking away was the only reasonable action, since I could take no more of her insults. I hope for future reference, she realized negative comments about my hairstyles would not be tolerated. It is HR was put to the test a month later in July when I got very long extension braids put in for the summer. The braids were so long, they extended down my back to my waistline. As she turned the corner in the office, she spotted me and looked in my eyes. She looked surprised and her face lit up. Good morning, I said. She replied, Good morning, and stifled back a comment that was on the tip of her lips. She walked swiftly so as not to say anything. As I went to put away my lunch, the refrigerator in the kitchen, the receptionist Ruth was setting up the coffee machine. I said hello, and she barely answered, saying hello with a question mark. I wondered what problems she experienced that morning, but went on my way. An hour later, when she passed nearby my desk, she gave me a resounding greeting. She did not recognize me in the kitchen, but when I was sitting at my desk, miraculously, she knew who I was. This was the craziest behavior I observed today. How could she not recognize me? She saw me on Friday before the weekend. You look a lot younger. You look great. Thanks so much, I said. It's amazing what a little hair can do for you. One simple Chinese girl sitting near me said, Oh, hair glow long. How you do that? How hair glow so fast, so long? I almost fell on the ground laughing. She was quite serious and puzzled. I wondered what planet she lived on. For decades, women have been using false hair to create extensions. She must have observed or mixed with people from other cultures, even though she lived in a city of over 2 million inhabitants. I felt compelled to explain the mystery in detail and suggested she use coconut oil for quick hair growth.
Thank you so much. It's
Thank
one
you
of
for
my
allowing me to read that.
it's one of the funniest passages that I use because they were genuinely puzzled by braided hair, and they thought it was my hair between Friday and Monday. How hair grows so long?
Yeah.
She
Oh,
really thought it was my real hair. So I said, just use coconut oil, you'll be fine. Because she struggled with hair growth. She had a like a little bald patch that was coming out. So it was fun to write this particular chapter, the hair effect. And I changed my hairstyle quite frequently. And there's some people just they couldn't recognize me. Isn't that crazy? Amusing. Anybody else experience at any of the ladies here if you worked in an
but
environment where people didn't know?
just if I may, that experience with the Asian reminded me of a nurse friend of mine who had taken an Asian tour, and they went to, China and Japan and those areas. And
Yes.
she said people were actually walking up to her in the street and was trying to wipe off the color on
Oh,
her
yes.
hand
Yes.
because they did not have a lot of experience with people of color,
Yes.
African people. Yeah. And so she was so shocked. She was like, why are these people touching me? But they
Yes.
thought that she had like painted her skin in this dark color. And that was a kind of, a crazy experience for her.
But just imagine in Toronto, every nationality is represented in Toronto, right? Over 2 million people. You have people from many different countries. And there's some person who thought I had this long hair in like 2-3 days.
Yeah, that is so
She
mind-boggling.
She took the bus, she took the train. Surely you see the people around you. But no, I guess not.
Wow, that is really, really weird. Oh,
But anyway, it was fun to write that particular hair effect because I did on purpose, really, just to see how I could upset the microenvironment. I'll come with different hairstyles, and it worked. I had all different hairstyles, and people were quite excited to see what she'd come with next, you know. Anyway, well, thank you so much to all the readers. Gersha, you want to say anything?
I would love to. I want to first thank you, Jenny Lynn, for allowing us to host you. It was a pleasure having you as author of the month for Poetry and Prose. And the amount of work that you put into this session, from creating the presentation and selecting the readings. Thank you so much. It was amazing.
It was
Thank
my
you.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to everyone that read, and thank you for everyone that joined. I know we've gone over, so I thank you for still being here with us. And I think the fact that we still have our participants is a testament to your writing. So
Oh, okay, that's great. Now, all the memos
everyone
are
loves to hear because
available.
we're still here, we're sticking around.
They're all available on Amazon and Amazon Kindle. In case people are curious and they want to read some more, please go ahead, because I have some fantastic stories, not just in Goodbye Frying Pan, but all the books. You would be shocked by some of the stories.
Well, thank you so much, Jenny Lynn, and thank you, everyone. Althea, I will let you have the closing remark. I see you're putting your hands.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that Jenny Lynn has written so much. I think we have to have her back again. She has a novel and other things that she's written. So yeah, it would be nice to have
My
her back
pleasure.
again
In the
as a
future
guest.
sometime.
All righty. Well, yes, Jenny Lynn, we would love to welcome you back. And to our participants, please come again. We meet twice a month. So our next meeting will be on the 20th of July. And Musilal, you have anything else to add before we close? You're muted.
Yes, I think we should have Jenny Lynn back again.
Yeah,
ASAP.
that's a consensus. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy your afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and open our virtual parking